Hello and welcome back to my Game Grid Toy Box for the next episode of Toy Box Tutorials. Before we move on, I want to address a question that came up regarding last week's tutorial and also take care of something that I forgot to do. So, as we come into the editor here, someone had reported last week when they tried to build this that the final ball, when it falls into one of the bins over there, wasn't registering on the scoreboard, and they wanted to know how to fix that. And I think the best solution for that, I think what's happening is when it drops into the bin, the bin's doing a lot of different things, and it's registering the scoreboard, it's doing incrementing or decrementing the counter, which is going through this logic gate and coming over to the challenge maker to complete the game. And depending on how fast some of those things go on certain systems, the completion of the game might be happening before the scoreboard is being updated. So what you can do is add in a time delayer between this logic gate and the challenge maker. And I'll show you how to do that. Basically, we'll put down a time delayer here, and then we'll go into the logic gate. And this is the connection we're looking at. It's the challenge maker connection, the first one going to the challenge maker, so that on output it completes the game. And I'll cancel out of this and go back into the logic menu. So we're going to delete this connection. Now you can see that connection is gone, and what we're going to do instead is a new logic connection on output. We'll come over to this time delayer and start the delay. And on the time delayer, a new logic connection when the delay is completed. Then we'll come to the challenge maker and complete the game. And by default, the time delayer has a 1 second delay. You don't need anything quite that long. I think a half a second should probably work. And that will should solve that problem. That should give everything else time to update before the challenge maker completes the game. Alright, now the other thing that I forgot to do last week, and I had it on my notes, but somehow I missed it. When the ball is bouncing through here, this is a very narrow area. And some of you who built this may have noticed that the ball sometimes bounces out of the field of play. And so what you should do, what I had intended to do, is add a scalable barrier block in here along the front of this in order to prevent that from happening. And we covered this way back in an earlier episode, very early episode. But basically you're going to put this in here and resize this, stretch it to fill the front of this whole playing area. Like that. Alright. And what that means is now the ball will not hit that. And normally when something hits this, there's a visual effect. And you can go into the properties for the scalable barrier block, as we learned in an earlier episode, and turn off that collision effect. And then the player will never notice that it's there, and the ball will stay in the playing area. Now that's a good thing to do also for these other two games that we did, because as the ball hits these bumpers and moves around, it's possible that it could hit it to such a degree that it bounces upward and out of the field of play. So it's a good idea to put down a scalable barrier block on top of this as well, so that it doesn't happen. So we'll put this into this back corner, like so. And then we'll stretch this across the entire playing field. That's as short as we can make it there, and that's fine. So that'll keep the ball from bouncing out of there and make sure it stays in the playing field. And we do the same thing over here, but on this one, it's a little bit more interesting because the playing field comes all the way back to here, and coincidentally this is also where we dropped the ball into the thing. So we can't cover this up because the ball will never get into the playing field. And so what we need to do is put down 2 different scalable barrier blocks here. We'll put one down that covers the majority of the game. Like that. And then we can put a second one down that covers this trough. And again, making sure that we don't cover up that opening. So like that. That way the ball can get in, but it cannot get out of it once it's in the field of play. And I had forgotten to put those scalable barrier blocks in earlier, but there we go. Okay, now we're going to move on to the final game in this toy box. This is the challenge that Mickey needs to complete in order to restore his world. As you may recall from episode 79, when we began this toy box, that Mickey's world has been transformed into a video game. And that is the setting for our toy box. And in order to escape the video game and put his world back the way it was, he will need to hack the computer that's controlling it and shut it down. We're going to spend the next few weeks building this challenge and learning how to use several new toys that we're going to need to build it. But first, let me show you what we're going to build. And this challenge takes place in town. So as we head into town, Mickey's suddenly confronted with some enemies. There we go. I'll make sure I get all my sparks. Alright, and we come into town, and we have another remote controller over here. But as we go to use it, it's protected by an energy force field. And so Mickey needs to come over to the terminal and hack the terminal to turn it off. And you guys have seen how this is used in a variety of play sets and toy boxes, but I'm not going to explain how that works, but it's a little mini game. So now we've hacked the terminal and the force field should be gone. So now we'll step onto the remote controller. And now here we are in a little computer game world. And we have Clue down there. And if I use the buttons on my controller, I can make him go left and right, up and down. So we have a townsperson that we can sort of control. So we're going to have Clue run through the little gauntlet here to try to reach the power switch.
Wonder what else I can try.
Whoa! And if he dies, you fail.
Guess I better try again.
So now force field's back up. And now we'll have to come hack the terminal again. And I normally am not that bad playing that little challenge. I kind of failed on purpose because I wanted you to see what happens, how it resets if you fail. So here we are, we'll start again. This time I'll make it through, Lord willing. And there we go. And now Mickey's world changes back into the real world, so to speak. No longer a video game. And there we are. So that is the little challenge that we're going to build. Okay, so now that you've seen what we're going to build, let's start building it. And the first thing we're going to need is the ability terminal. And we'll place that right here on this little street corner, facing that way. And I've already placed a replayer and a remote controller out of the Creativitoys drawer, and all I've done is place those ahead of time. And we're also going to need a button. So let me put that down. We'll drop that right here. Alright, now this toy is not new to Disney Infinity 3.0, but in a sense it kind of is. Disney Infinity 2.0 had an ability terminal, but it was very different. In 2.0, this toy simply acted like a button, and if your character had the appropriate ability, you could use the toy to invoke whatever other toys you connected to it. But in 3.0, the developers revamped this toy to better fit the Star Wars theme, and they built a little mini-game into it, as you saw earlier when I demoed it. And they added some additional options in the properties. So if we open up the logic menu for this toy and we look at the properties, there are two properties. The first is character type, and this is basically the ability that you want to be able to use this terminal. So any character by default with the tech ability will be able to use this terminal. Any character without the tech ability will not be able to use it. And you can change this so that only flying characters can use it, only characters with the web swing ability can use it, or super strength, or super jump, or any of these things, or any. If you set it to any, then any character can use this, and it doesn't matter. It's never going to really check their ability. Now, some of these options are pretty obvious, like lightsaber and force. You pretty much know what characters can do that if you're familiar at all with Star Wars. Or if you know which characters are villains, you know which characters will be able to use this if you set that. It may not be as obvious for certain things like super strength or super jump. And so in that case, what you can do is go to the Disney Infinity Wiki, and I'm going to include a link to that on my blog and in the video description. And that will take you over there, and it lists all of these abilities and all of the characters that use those abilities. So if you need to know if a specific character will be able to use your terminal, then you can go to that website and look at that. Now, the other property that's here is time limit. And by default, this is 30 seconds, which is usually plenty of time. But if you have small children or people who struggle with this toy, you can increase this to a larger value. And it increases the number of seconds that are required before the terminal will be failed to be hacked. Or if you have really experienced players and you want a really good challenge, you can take this down. And you can take this all the way down to 8 seconds. You're going to have to be really good to be able to do that. We're going to leave this set at the default of 30. And I'm going to change the character type for my game to be any. We also have some logic connections. There are two trigger signals this toy will broadcast. One is terminal hacked, and this will be broadcast when the little mini game is completed successfully and the terminal is hacked. The other one will be broadcast if the time limit expires without the player being able to finish the mini game, or if they press the wrong key on their controller. So those are pretty straightforward. And there's also a couple of behaviors, which is why I dropped this button. So if we select the button and do a new logic connection when pressed, we come to the ability terminal. There are two behaviors. You can activate and deactivate this toy. By default, when you place the toy, it's active. And once you hack the terminal, it automatically deactivates itself. And so if you need to reset the terminal, you can use the activate signal. If you want this toy to only be accessible after the player does something, you can deactivate it, like perhaps on a level starter or something. And then when the player does something to make the terminal active, maybe they route power to it or something like that that you want to do, then you can activate it. I'm going to set this button up temporarily just to activate the toy and essentially reset it. Alright, so what we're going to do, as you saw in the game, is that hacking the terminal will take down a force field that's protecting our remote controller. And to do that, we're going to use the replayer. And we've done this in an earlier video, so this shouldn't be too much of a surprise. This was pretty early in the Toy Box tutorial series, though. So I've set the replay interval to 0. And now we're out of the editor. We'll step on the toy, which opens the menu in the lower right. On my Wii U, I press B to start recording, and then I have to step off to get back into the editor. And we're going to place down a scalable barrier block. And we need to place this with a little bit of a border around this toy. So I'm not going to place it here. I'm going to place it back over here a little bit, so that the player can't just walk up to the edge of the scalable barrier block and be able to activate this toy. So you want to do it something like that. And then we'll exit the editor, excuse me, step on our replayer to get that menu in the lower right, and I'm going to stop recording and step off. And so now if we run up here, we have our invisible force field around that toy and we can't get to it. So Mickey's going to have to hack the terminal. So now to do that, to hack the terminal, to bring down the force field, we open the logic menu for the ability terminal. We do a new logic connection. When the terminal is hacked, we'll come over to our replayer and we'll clear it. That will take down the force field. And then if we need to test this multiple times, we'll do a new logic connection on our action button when pressed. And we'll use this to, whoop, we already did that. Already hooked it up to the terminal, but we also need to play back and put the force field back. Alright, so let's try it out. So now we're going to hack our terminal. There we go. And now that force field should be down. And it is. And that's good. And you might wonder why I placed that so far away from the terminal. That will become clear in another week or two. Probably next week. Let's go ahead and press this. And now you can see, now we can hack the terminal again. And that button should also have put back the scalable barrier block, and it did. So that's it for the ability terminal. It's a great toy that you can use in a wide variety of settings and games. Next week we're going to take one more look at the remote controller, and I'll show you a way that you can use it to move a townsperson like Clue around. Until next week, I want to thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial. If so, please hit the like button and leave a comment before you go. Also, if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, just click my photo in the lower right corner of this video, and then you won't miss my next episode or any of my videos for the other toy boxes I'm working on. That's all for me today. Have a great day.